guys, HigheverRains here. This month I've got the first of a series discussing the links between the Avvar, the Titans, and the Elves of Elvhenan. We're going to be covering a lot of ground here, so we'll have a couple different parts before we link everything together. Today we're going to start by laying the groundwork for this theory with an analysis of Avvar myths, and how they link to both Mythal and the Titans. We start our discussion with the idea that the ancient elves were once spirits that gained a physical form. Our biggest hint that this is actually a possible thing comes from the fact that we've seen it done. The most obvious example of a spirit crossing the veil and taking on a human form is of course Cole. But in truth we have other examples, such as a spirit of perseverance who gives you a bow of that same name if you find her 3 times in the hissing wastes, or the forbidden ones, the most obvious example of which is Imshale, who tells you quite clearly he is a choice spirit. But we're not basing this assumption on examples alone. In truth, we have written evidence that the ancient elves were indeed once spirits, from codices that we find in their very own archive at the Dirthara, the closest thing to primary sources that we have for Elvhenan. The first of these, following along from Imshale, is the Dirthara Codex Exile of the Forbidden Ones that tie Imshale and his accomplices to Elvhenan itself. The codex reads as follows, with important pieces highlighted here. The pages of this book, Memory, show the blazing forms of the Avvar banishing a howling spirit from the reaches of the Fade that touch their lands. A voice rings out, stern and imperial, for abandoning the people in their time of greatest need, for casting aside form to flee to where the earth could not reach. We declare Zebenkek and others of her ilk exiled from the lands of the Avvar. Beware, their familiarity with shape allows them to travel paths unaided. They may be bound, but only the protection of your gods will fully shield you from their malice. They are forbidden from the earth that is our right. Imshale himself is a powerful spirit, capable of promoting the growth of red lyrium, and that's important for a later video. We'll also have evidence here based on the references that they fled where the earth could not reach, that this time of greatest need refers to the wars between the elves and the titans, known in other sources as the Pillars of the Earth. Now this codex is not enough proof, however, that all the elves and all the Avvar were spirits, and thankfully we have other evidence to this claim. Also within the Dirthara, we find the Dirthara Codex The Deepest Fade, and it reads as follows, again with highlighting. The pages of this book, Memory, are instructions on how to reach the deepest parts of the Fade, realms so far removed they're unmarked by dreamers. Epiphany requires a mind smooth as mirror glass, still as stone. Put aside 10 years for practice, and the next 100 for searching. What others have learned will ease your journey. Those who never manifested outside the Fade will find it easier to find its stillest roots, but it is rare that compulsion overtakes our brethren of the air. Here the insinuation is that these brethren of the air, those who never manifested outside the Fade, are spirits. Brethren here is the key word. There is a link between spirits and the ancient elves here, and the assumption is that they are not so dissimilar. We know that Uthenera, the act of leaving one's body behind and wandering instead in the Fade, requiring no sustenance from the outside world once perfection has been achieved, was not just a common practice in Elvhenan, but often the way that the immortal elves finally departed the physical world. This only ever happened when the elves became weary of life, and the memories became too much to bear from the Codex Uthenera. At this point, it bears returning back to the matter of Cole. Cole's personal quest poses a lot of questions about the nature of spirits and people themselves. The possibility of a spirit becoming a person, yes, they can. And the possibility of a spirit becoming something halfway between the two, again, yes, they can. Solus says that regardless of Cole's special circumstances he remains a spirit. Varric challenges the idea that this is something nearly so cut and dry, with the statement that he came into this world to be a person, let him be one. Later in Redcliffe, when confronted with the decision between a human Cole who remembers and adapts, and a spirit Cole who forgets and later purges his thoughts of the human, we're given a very stark contrast between the two. As a human, upon being asked about being a human, Cole will say, "It hurts. Everything hurts. Everyone remembers me now. I can only make them miss me for a few heartbeats. But I'm real. More real anyway. And I understand more than I did." He goes on to say, "I still feel things, flashes of their minds, pain, hurt, all of it. It's not so loud anymore. I make more noise myself, so I don't hear as much unless I want to. I remember more things though. It lets me learn." He says spirits sense something that interests them and stick to it. They don't remember much, it keeps them pure, but it also keeps them from learning, from growing. "I wanted to help people, but I only knew how to do it in the simplest way. Now I can see more." This paints a very large dynamic between the spirit world of shedding the hurts and pains that ultimately lead to growth by forgetting and keeping things simple, and the more human tendencies of adapting through pain. The old elves entering Uthanera would leave their bodies behind because the world itself was too hurtful, too wearying, too heavy, too painful. They were stripping away those parts that held them back, purifying themselves in the ways that spirits did while forgetting. But Uthanera was not always forever. Both the Uthanera Codex and the fact that Avvar says the elves are waking from Uthanera to guard Mythal's temple are proof of this. If shedding physical form to live eternally in the Fade could be reversed, that meant that a spirit could also cross back into a physical form, as the codices from the Dirthara state with regards to the forms taken by the Forbidden Ones. Taking a physical form was necessary to grow and become more, and indeed this tradition of taking on other forms has continued, not only in instances where the ancient elves took on non-humanoid bodies, such as the draconic form reserved for the gods, that we witness Mythal and Morrigan take, but in other examples as well. The sheer specialization of shapeshifting is noted in conversation from Dragon Age origins between Morrigan and a Dalish warden to have long been part of the traditions of the Dalish keepers, and the shapeshifting ability is the known province of hedge mages, like those that yet exist among the Avvar. Morrigan says to take on a form, one must simply truly understand the experience of being that creature. It is not a strange leap, then, to consider that these ancient elves could take on whatever form they pleased. In fact, they regularly did, particularly the Avvar, who are, as established by Solus and the Trespasser DLC of Inquisition, not so much gods as incredibly powerful mages. Consider a moment Mythal, who rather than died, simply vanished into the Fade until she could join with Flemeth. We know that spirits can die after a fashion, and are born from the concentration of ideas. It is Solus and his all-new Faded for Her quest that confirms this regarding the Spirit of Wisdom, but we're given this information elsewhere as well, in relation to the Avvar and their gods. The ancient elves came from spirits, and were often travelling into the depths of the Fade in spiritual form in Uthanera. They were beings of incredible power, able to shape and form the world to their desires, and they did, even before the rise of Tevinter, interact with both humans and dwarves. The dwarven and human interactions will be covered in a moment, but we'll get to the dwarven and elven interactions in the next video. For the moment, we'll focus on the human-elven connection. We know from multiple sources that the elves did interact with the humans, and by this I don't mean the legends of Tevinter's destruction of Erlathen, which are in fact a question, not a fact. Instead, we refer back to the words of the spirit of an elven arcane warrior trapped long ago in a soul gem when fleeing some great beast. We find this gem in the Brazilian forest, and it's possible to ask how it wound up in that gem in the first place. It says that it put itself there, fleeing a horrible battle, a last-ditch attempt to survive by fleeing its form and becoming a spirit trapped within the gem. This recalls the discussion of the exile of the Forbidden Ones, who did very much the same thing. But the soul has more to say on this topic. The dialogue is as follows. Was this a war with the humans? The presence remembers the humans. This was a time even after the humans had come. It was they who had built this place, long before. Perhaps the war was with other humans? Perhaps it was for something else, something that killed both the humans and elves that were here. It is not clear. The humans had built the temple then, but it was a site where elves and humans both lived together. But this site is in the far southeastern reaches of Ferelden, where the barbarian clans lived, such as the Alamari and the Avvar, and not anywhere near Tevinter. The humans that populated this place were not those that would later form the Tevinter Imperium. The Avvar are a splinter group from ancient Alamari tribes. The Alamari converted to the cult of the Maker under Andraste's leadership after the First Blight, but the Avvar maintained the older beliefs, an animist religion, and a belief in the divinity of spirits of nature that continue to play a role in Ferelden architecture and culture to this day. The Avvar worship spirits as gods, and see spirits as teachers, a practice that echoes that of the ancient elves. While there are a multitude of spirit gods recognized by the Avvar, the main gods of their pantheon are Korth the Mountain Father, the Lady of the Skies, and Hakon Winter's Breath. In Inquisition Jaws of Hakon DLC, we actually meet the spirit of Hakon's Winter's Breath, bound by the Hakonites into the form of a dragon, held in check by the late Inquisitor Ameridan, and the new Inquisitor can finally finish the job of fighting Hakon, ending his life as a dragon and sending his spirit back into the Fade. The Avvar believe that their gods can be reborn through ritual, which, given that they are spirits, is not impossible, as Solus himself admits if you ask him what will happen to Wisdom after all new Faded for Her. The Lady of the Skies and Korth the Mountain Father are both incredibly prominent because they are, in a general sense, the gods of death and life, respectively. Koth has dominion over the earth and created the caves, inviting the people in to be sheltered. The lady has dominion over the skies, which also gives her the role as the goddess of death, as the Avvar have a tradition of sky burials. She is, however, also the goddess of love, and it is her songs that are sung when couples are wed. While the Avvar gods are spread across the world, including the free marches from the Cult of the Skies, and the far east of Ferelden, with the dialogue from the Statue of War in the Wending Wood, and also the Vigil's Keep, there are many of their legends centered on the great features of the Ferelden landscape, like Lake Calenhad and the Frostback Mountains. If the Avvar gods are spirits, and they indeed are, for we meet Hakon in the Jaws of Hakon, then the Lady of the Skies and Koth very well are real too, at least in some sense. And that means considering the possibility that they are in fact spirits we currently know, very powerful entities that exist in Thedas today. The Evan were powerful spirits taking on a physical form and proclaiming themselves gods. If the early tribesmen of Ferelden lived with the elves of Elvhenan, as the appearances in the ruins seem to suggest, then it makes sense that these gods would, at least in some cases, overlap, that the Avvar would easily find themselves worshipping spirits that the elves worshipped. This is not to say that the Avvar worshipped all the creators. If they did, it was not exclusively, but there is one of their gods that continues to be linked to current legends that suggests that this may indeed be the case. The Lady of the Skies, the goddess of love according to the Codex Lady of the Skies, and of death according to the Caddis of the Lady of the Skies, and of protection according to the Codex Constellation Vissus, is responsible for the defense of the people according to the Codex Cult of the Skies, even into modern days. And she has a number of mentions throughout Thedosian legend and cultural myth, and they connect in some interesting ways. We'll begin with the saga of Tyrda Brightaxe, the mage considered mother of the Avvar. The Avvar have an oral history tradition, meaning they pass on the stories of their past through song. Tyrda's story, which will be on the screen by Stanza with important pieces highlighted in red, relates the tale of the Avvar leader, a possible dreamer Somniari, who is called the Spirit's Bride. In particular, this spirit is called the Laughing Lady of the Skies, a leaf-eared lover, an elven spirit. It was Tyrda who led the Avvar tribes into the mountains, and it was there she encountered a dwarf called Hendir, who the Lady of the Skies bade Tyrda to bed, and thus have a child of Tyrda's bloodline, called Morriganen. Tyrda did as she was told, before eventually taking her freedom from Hendir, who wished her well, and giving her tribe a place in the Frostbacks. The final lies refer to her leaf-eared lover, the Lady of the Skies, as dream delivered, the raven feathered. Whether this love affair was true or just a tale of Tyrda's devotion, we are given much about the Lady of the Skies herself through this tale. She suggested alliances with the dwarves. She was an elf, but also a spirit, and she is linked to ravens and the name Morriganen. Before we break this down what this means, there's another legend that deserves to be told, that of Arrowwood. Again, the tale is on the screen for you to follow with important parts highlighted. Arrowwood was an archer who traded his heart to a spirit in exchange for great power. He shot the sun from the sky, conquered massive areas of the world, and basically wound up challenged by the Gothi, a tribe of the Syrian that occupied modern-day Olay, and were united with the Alamari. Here the story becomes vague, because the Gothi either sent for help from the Witch of the Arbor Wilds, or a demon, or her daughters, or the Lady of the Skies. By now it should be clear where this trend is going. Flemeth, Mythal, is the embodiment of these stories of the witches of the wilds, taking on the forms of her daughters to be passed along through time. As Mythal, she was linked to the dwarves through her work as one of the Evan, which states she was instrumental in hunting the pillars of the earth, the Titans. And in old elven rhymes she is described as giving the dwarves dreams. She is also shown she's capable of communicating through dreams, like the leaf-eared lover did with Tyrda in the legends, when she speaks with Sandal, and also with Kieran. We also have vague reflections of the story of Arrowwood battling the sun in the origin tales of the world as told by the Dalish, where Elvhenan defeats the sun, and Mythal is the only one who can stop him. Mythal as a figure was considered the great protector, the mother, the goddess of love, but similarities do not end there. According to Avvar legend, it was Mythal's tears that filled Lake Calenhad, and according to Dalish legend, Mythal was born from a sea of tears shed by the earth. Mythal is represented by dragons, which her own daughter Yavanna said once ruled the skies, and the Lady of the Skies is closely linked to winged creatures, which take a part in her sky burials. What then is the other side of this equation? The connection with the dwarves, with the mountain father Korth? It's Mythal as the Lady of the Skies. Who then is Korth? Korth is said to live on the mountain of Belenas, which once stood at the site of Lake Calenhad. The legends we have conflict, because on the one hand we have information that Belenas was destroyed by a serpent, Nathramar, and thus made the Lady of the Skies create the lake in the first place. But another legend, however, says that Korth just got tired of people wanting things and asked to move to the domain of the Lady of the Skies far from everyone else. In truth, we're discussing either the destruction or the movement of a mountain in either legend, and in the serpent legend there's some familiar throwbacks to something in elven lore, obtained from the Codex elven god Andruil, obtained in the Temple of Mythal, which makes this source one from the time of Elvhenan. In the Codex we're told that Andruil went hunting in the abyss, made armour of the void, set plague loose on her lands, drove herself mad, and made the other gods fear she would turn on them next. Mythal spread rumours that a great beast lived at the base of a mountain and was waiting for Andruil, and when Andruil showed up, Mythal, taking the form of a great serpent, fought Andruil and won. It may be that Mythal, the Lady of the Skies, was the serpent that destroyed Belenas, and then wept to see what she had done. Or it may be that the mountain just decided not to be the site of any more fights and was moved. In our lore, we only have one instance of a being that moves mountains, and that is a Titan, the true children of the stone, a spirit in the same way that the spirits are children of the Fade, and the original shapers of the earth. Korth is the mountain father, creator of the Frostbacks, in truth a shaper, and if he wanted to move a mountain, that would be a simple thing for a Titan. He is also considered the father of the dwarves, which would hold true as well, as Valta in Descent says that the dwarves are the children of the Titans. We know that Mythal did involve herself in the destruction of the Pillars of the Earth. In her temple the elves prepared to hunt the Pillars of the Earth, and later she is venerated as the one who struck them down. Hail Mythal, abdicator and saviour, she has struck down the Pillars of the Earth. These victories, which we'll discuss in greater depth in Part 2, were not Mythal's alone. The other Evanuris appeared to have followed suit, hunting more of the Titans, particularly Elvhenan. But she appears to have changed her mind, perhaps resulting in a partnership of sorts, or a protection. After all, she has always been a spirit of protection, and something put her at odds with the other Evanuris, which led to her murder. The Alamari beliefs include a reverence of 9 sacred mountains, which actually comes from the Chant of Light in 2 locations. The first is the much disputed Canticle of Andraste, the Epiphany of Our Lady. The canticle itself mimics the same sort of style as old Alamari sagas like Dane and the Werewolf and Turda Brightax, though there is some question as to if Andraste actually wrote it. Either way, it does reference the sacred mountain, in this case likely Korth. The other is far less controversial, Exaltations, written by Cordulus Dracon. It is this which provides the arguably more important information. There are at least 9 sacred mountains, and one of them is the mountain upon which rests Andraste's ashes. Andraste's ashes were laid to rest in the Temple of Sacred Ashes above the village of Haven, which you visit in Dragon Age Origins, and which you see destroyed in Dragon Age Inquisition. This site, we are told by Oghren in Origins, is the purest site of lyrium he has ever seen. And where there is lyrium, there is a Titan. But more than this, the Temple of Sacred Ashes contains both Alamari and Elven statues and artwork, including what may be an image of Mythal herself. And this temple, while stated to be Alamari in origin, actually appears to be far older, or else built on the ruins of an even older site, one meant for Mythal, and subsequently the Lady of the Skies. We know this because during the fight with Corypheus in the final arena, you can see Mythal's golden mural set into the floor. So we have a temple and a lot of lyrium linked closely together, as was Belenas and Korth with the Lady of the Skies, as was Mythal with the dwarves and the Titans. The Avvar gods, and by extension the old Alamari gods, at least a few of them, are spirits we know under elven names, or even spirits of the earth themselves. Korth is a Titan, and the Lady of the Skies is Mythal, and that changes a lot of perspective in the war between Titans and Elvhenan, and our perspective on the dwarves. Thedas has always been a complicated place, and the story of Dragon Age has always been one of complicated interconnections, rather than simplistic answers. Choices and actions have always had their consequences in Dragon Age, and that holds true throughout history, where these interconnected lines of the past truly tangled together. Next time we'll cover a bit about the Elvhenan Wars and how these relate to the Titans, and then we'll wrap up part 3 by considering a couple questions. What causes Titans to wake, and how do they end up corrupted? Thanks again to my Patreon supporters, without whom content like this would not be possible, and if you enjoy this content, do consider joining them. Thanks for watching guys, and that's it for me.